Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. I do like the opening being what it is, the title card, especially having that Western style to it. But before we get to Lizzie's sides of things, let's start with Caleb and Jed, and then work our way through the Hope thing and then the Lizzie thing. But first and foremost, with the Jed and Caleb situation, Caleb's looking for Argus, but Jed follows him, and he's like, no, we got this, because he knows exactly what Caleb's trying to do. And I love that, because when we first got introduced to Jed, it's like, oh, he's your typical jock. But we've seen little by little, his character has evolved into, he's a team player, he's all about that, he is a lot more insightful than people give him credit for. The fact is that he knows what Caleb's trying to do. You're trying to capture this monster because you think by doing it, you'll earn the squad's forgiveness for what you did. So when the time, because obviously Jed's all about, all right, man, let's get a flying perspective. He's like, what? Pull those wings out, and he hops on Caleb's back. But Caleb's like, no. He's like, I came here to kill a monster, not become one. Because the thing is, Caleb will never use those powers frequently. They're a part of himself now, but he doesn't want to ever acknowledge them because it's what he did in the process to get those powers. I betrayed everyone. I betrayed Hope. I did all of that for the purpose of protecting someone I love, and he regrets that. Yes, would he make that same decision again? Probably, but it's still the thing of, it'd probably be me making the wrong decision again. And obviously using those powers will be a constant reminder of that mistake of what he did, so he doesn't want to use them or rely on them, because he'd become, the monster he was when Malivore was around, so. But when the time, because I was wondering, is Argus not going to be the one that did that damage, killed that body that they found? Because they're like, oh, who is this person? It's like, well, we don't know. We don't have time to figure it out. We don't have time to bury him. We got to get to killing this Argus thing. So Jed was off and on his own. And I was like, oh, is Argus not the one responsible? Is something else responsible? But then, no, it seems like it is Argus, which I love Caleb being like, oh, I know, I see all your eyes on me. I know I'm pretty. And he goes for one of his eyes. He's like, oh my God, someone fill my mouth, but luckily Jed showed up and he had a whole bunch of wolves backing him up. He's like, yeah, some new friends. Oh, old friends. I thought it was going to be a moment, which interesting timing because I was watching something else recently, don't want to spoil anything, where a pack of wolves showed up to put in some work. They put in some work. The wolves this time didn't, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I guess it's Jed, his former alphaness to because he is the alpha. Because wasn't Raphael the alpha for a while? I don't know if they ever clarified whether Jed went back to being the alpha or not. I don't remember. Yeah, they did. Because there was a whole, him and Finch thing. That was the whole point of all of that anyway. Regardless, I forgot about that. But he was trying to, get the wolves to attack, and they just bailed. I was like, oh, that's kind of a letdown, isn't it? But when the time came, Caleb unleashed that fiery breath and burned Argus to a crisp. Because the complicated thing about that, though, is we still don't know why Argus left without doing anything. We know Ryan/Clark, was right in front of it, and it didn't touch him. It didn't go after Hope. The moment it was cut free, it just ran. Either it was just enjoying its freedom, or there was something else that drew its attention. Now, Jed and Caleb have a very neat heart-to-heart. It's like, oh, that was pretty badass back then. He's like, yeah, but those powers I don't ever plan on using again. And Jed's like, I wasn't always the cool werewolf that I am. And he's like, and Caleb's like, oh, really? He's like, yeah. I wasn't proud of the thing I did to activate my curse. Caleb's like, yeah, you never actually told me what you actually did. He's like, the details aren't important. But he's like, for a couple of years, I carried it around with me there was a rock in my shoe. And I put those same shoes on and again. He's like, I felt like it just kind of, he thought the situation put that rock in his shoe. But he realized it's no, I'm the one that did that. And it's so he's like, so I'm supposed to get a new pair of shoes. He's like, I get what you're trying to do, but you need to forgive yourself first, because if you don't forgive yourself, it's not going to matter whether anyone else does, which is very insightfulness. It's kind of you need to love yourself before you love someone else, because if you can't love you, how can you allow how can you really ever truly allow someone to love you? You know, it's kind of that type of thing. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Like I said, very insightful to come from Jed, you know, and it's like, he's like, no matter how fly the kicks are. But it's like, yeah, like, it's like, oh, you're pretty alright, Jed. But then the body wakes up and you're like, okay, what is that? Is that a byproduct of Argus killing someone? So like, my thought was, maybe it wasn't Argus that killed, like maybe Argus was after something else, because maybe his main thing is going after Malivore monsters, and neither Hope, being the Tribred, or Clark, who's human now, fit that category. So maybe it was looking for something specific. And this thing, whatever killed that body, is that something specific, or Argus did that because that's not just some ordinary person, that's something else. Or two, my thought was, could it be that Argus can be like an infection, that what, like, it's kind of like a, that it can be like transferable, like vampirism, whereas like maybe when it bites somebody, that, and it does what it does to a body, like it's actually turning them into an Argus, so like when it does die, it reconstitutes itself in a new body. Like, would there have been multiple Arguses running around? Are there technically multiple Arguses running around? Like, did it do this to other bodies and it's already happened? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't think that's, I'm not well versed enough in Argus's lore. I mean, Caleb probably would have come across that if that was the case, but to be fair, he probably just did a quick enough research just to find out how to kill it and stuff like that, but that's about it. So we have no, like, I don't know, because that's just kind of like a mystery up in the air. So, well, like I said, technically two mysteries, because we still don't know why Argus just left. Like I said, could have just easily been like, oh, I'm free, so I'm going to go, or like something else drew its attention. So there's that. Then on the flip side of things, the Super Squad is trying to figure out how they're going to handle the whole Hope situation of trying to bring her back. And I love that they try to get some inspiration from, it's like, yeah, Cleo, me, like, yeah, the people who know her best. And then Ethan and Finch look at each other because, like, yeah, we're the newcomers. Like, we don't know Hope that way. Even Ethan's like, yeah, I flirted with her once, but she probably doesn't even remember that, you know? So I love that. I guess it's like, because both of them, like, we have no memories of Hope. We're not tight with her. The other two people who would be pretty tight with her aren't here right now. That being, I think Jed probably would have some memories, but, well, technically 3 or 4, because you have to include, like, Landon, Raphael. You could say, like, Jed, Caleb, but also, like, Lizzie wasn't there, too, but she wouldn't be in a cooperative move when it comes to this whole Hope Michelson situation. But, nevertheless, Hope actually showed up at the school because she was trying to get weapons necessary to fight Triad. Well, the Triad. But they offer her a deal. If we can convince you to turn your humanity back on. Because, like, what inspired all of this is the, Josie was doing some research and she found out about, it's like, oh, I guess they never knew that. I mean, I'm sure Caroline probably would never, ever talk about that, the time she turned off her humanity. It's like, it's interesting. Also never remember that parallel, like, both of the, like, Caroline burned her mom's letter. Obviously, by the time Damon got around to it, his mom was already gone, so he never had a chance to really make things right between them. So I never knew, like, there was kind of that parallel between them until I just thought, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I think I forgot about that at the time. But it's like, yeah, that's not one of, no parent probably ever talks about their low points in their life. Alark's a little bit more open now just because he's like, I need to be a lot more transparent with my kids of, like, understanding why I am the way I am. But, like, Caroline probably, it's like, yeah, that's kind of a dark point in her history that she probably doesn't want to, like, talk about. So Joe finds out about that. It's like, yeah. So they plan on trying to do the same thing to, like, find the right emotional trigger to flip Hope's switch back on, humanity switch back on. So the plan is to, like, you know, they're putting on a performance to be like, hey, give us a chance. Like, if we don't, like, get your humanity back on, then you can get the weapons and we'll leave you alone. And MG puts on, essentially, was it Salvatore Idol? I love it. And basically Hope leaning into the whole, like, Salmon Cowl of it all, just being so mean. And even part of the way through it, turning around, she's like, actually, this is kind of fun. Because she's like, oh, I can't physically hurt you guys because of a spell. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to hurt you. And everyone was like, oh, and they were like, she was like, what Minji had been, no, she can't hurt you. He's like, yeah, physically I can't, but I can emotionally. And she proceeds to emotionally destroy everyone. Wade, I even love the Pedro thing. And she's like, you really want me to do this? She's like, I mean, my humanity might be off, but I'm not a monster. It's like, he was being so adorable. And it's just like, you want me to be honest? His finger should be cut off so he never draws again. And it's just like, okay, good, awesome job, Pedro. But the star burns up, so he knows, like, he didn't hear her harsh words, but it's still a thing of like, oh, I wasn't able to help Hope. So you're like, oh, that's so heartbreaking. It's okay, little guy, you did your best, you know? And then there was the Landon thing. I was kind of surprised by that, because I was like, that's not going to work, is it? Because that's complete and utter horse crap, right? Because the real Landon never wrote a letter, because I was like, he never would have had an opportunity or time to actually write one. Would he have? I was like, did he know about the Tribred in that time frame enough to there to be a moment to know about, like, the letter? But apparently, like, it was Cleo in disguise trying to help, you know, pretend to be Landon. But she knows about the letter because her and Landon did talk in Malivore. So I was like, oh, I didn't know the letter was actually a thing. I thought that was something. I thought Hope was going to call you out because she's like, oh, like, Landon would have never had any time. There was no time frame in him knowing about the Tribredness to know to, like, write a letter and stuff like that. He was already going, like, Malivore had already stepped. Like, that's what I was thinking the justification was going to be. But it's like, no. So apparently he did write one. I was like, oh, that's fascinating. Or at least, I think the way Cleo said it sounds like he did write a letter. Maybe it was with him in Malivore, or probably like he wrote the letter in Malivore is kind of what I'm implying. Like, I don't know if that's what that's supposed to be indicative of. So maybe that's probably where the letter was at the very least. So, but yeah, any opportunity she shot down everybody else at the end and being like, oh, Ethan, you were going to make some pathetic sports metaphor because blah blah blah. Oh, Fitch, you were going to do something for, you're here to take Josie's spot because you're codependent. And MG, blah, 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 all the stars got burnt up. And it's like, nope, you guys pretty much failed. No one was able to convince me, so I'm going to get my weapons and bounce. But MG made a final, like, call at the end. He realized, like, the reason why the letter situation didn't work is... The reason why it worked on Caroline, because it was something she couldn't get back. So, like, she had destroyed something that she could never get back. Like, it was about something that could never be given back. And so it's like, that's what this is. This is your home. These are your friends you fought beside and bled for, you know? And it's like, that void, like, if you're not going to be back here to fill it, he's like, I will. And she's like, MG, you don't have what it takes. Like, the tough calls that have to be made. She's like, I'm handing you a sword. This won't even kill me, but even when the time comes, even though it's a weapon that won't even hurt me, you still won't do it. You don't have what it takes to be the leader to kind of take over things. Obviously, Ethan and Fitch tried their plans of... Because they were saying, like, at the very least, what would make it easier to turn her humanity back on would be to drain her blood. But their plan failed because she's like, right, I've got pretty good hearing. So Ethan over here is a mouth breather, so took them all both down easily. But then Darkseid Josie shows up. But that was kind of part of Josie's plan because it's like she needed something that would help. And Darkseid Josie's like, oh, I'm going to flip your humanity back on like I did Jade. And she snaps her finger. It's like, oh, looks like I'm still here. Like, my humanity's at flat going. She's like, no, I figured it wouldn't work. You are a Tribrid, and even I'm not that powerful. But she's like, what I wanted to make sure, though, was to see that if there was going to be fear in your eyes. And she's like, I'm not afraid of anything. And then she tosses the truth orb, and she grabs it, and it turns red. I'm like, ooh. And Dark Josie's like, oh, despite everything else, like, despite you being the big bad hybrid, this little wall of yours you've created, you running from, like, what happened with Landon, oh, it's all going to come crumbling now because your humanity will eventually get switched on. Your defense mechanism will crumble, and then things will be worse than ever because it's bad enough that you already did what you did to Alaric, but now, like, all this other stuff you're doing, it's like, yeah, like, you're making things even worse. And that's literally what Ryan / Clark was trying to say, like, beforehand. Last time, he was like, do not go back home, like, before you do something you regret. She already kind of did, but it's like, yeah, you're going to continue to do more stuff upon becoming the, now that you're a tri-breed, and is all going to come crumbling down. And it's going to break you even more, because because Caleb's on his redemption tour right now. Once her humanity comes back, Hope's going to have a lot of redeeming to do, The problem is, like, will everyone be here waiting for her? Well, there's other aspects to this, but, Joe tried to talk to her about, like, the fact is, you could have just killed us, but you didn't. Like, you could have killed my dad, but you didn't. You hurt him, sure, but you didn't kill him. The fact is that you actually warned us away from him, because despite everything, your humanity is there. Because, truth be told, she doesn't want her humanity switched back on, because the moment it does, everything's going to hit her, and it's like, that's why she was trying to keep them away, because she tries to play the role of the bad guy, but somewhere deep down inside, she is her. Because despite Klaus's situations, he never had his humanity flipped off. He just had his complicated circumstances. There was a big softy underneath all, like, Klaus's, like, complications, But it's like, yeah, like, Hope has a big heart, and her heart will break. She will be devastated when the time comes in her human. Hopefully she doesn't do something she'll ultra regret, but for storytelling purposes, it's going to be something that she can't take back, potentially. So we'll see, but she ends up deciding, she's like, oh, what am I going to do with you, Josie? Which is interesting the moment that scene happened, because I'm like, kind of a parallel with what's going on with the therapy box with Lizzie, because, well, she's trying to prove her father's innocence, because he was accused of killing his entire school, all his students, and burning down the school. But she's like, I know my father would never do that. So she's trying to prove his innocence. And obviously it's like, oh, you want to avoid the Michelson game, because Caleb approaches her, and it's like, yeah, she's kind of a monster in her own right, so you're not going to want to go toe-to-toe with her. But it turns out Caleb's a vampire. But Uncle Rick, what's her dad's name then? If maybe like, oh, he's Alaric, and maybe the uncle is just Rick. It's supposed to play the dual sides, because the teacher's supposed to represent who Alaric is now. The Uncle Rick is supposed to represent who Alaric was before. I didn't think about that until, like, Lizzie explained it. And I was like, I didn't even notice the parallels of what that. I was like, oh, is that just supposed to be, like, the good and bad of Alaric? But it's like, no, it's that's arguable, but it's more so like, oh, like the dual sides of Alaric, the side of himself who he is now versus who he used to be. I just think that's so interesting. He even references his wife, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that is kind of sad. There's circumstances about that. That was early Vampire Diaries, so I know who it was, because it was, God, I'm blanking, I can never remember how to pronounce her last name. Is it Krishner or something like that? I always butcher it, but I know she's Jenny from the L Word. It's kind of like the thing I best know her from, but I remember that was his ex-wife, that was Elena's, mom, because if I remember, David Anders, Blaine from iZombie, well, this was way beforehand, but, he was her dad, if I remember correctly. But yeah, like he talked about, like, right, wanting, that's why he kills all the vampires, trying to, get revenge for her, which is very true to, I wonder, did Alaric ever really go too much into his past about being a vampire hunter and stuff like that? Once again, like, just like Caroline tries to leave her past behind, I'm sure he does too. Well, we know that, because Lizzie knows that because she stumbled across the information going through her dad's journals. Maybe that's an interesting parallel too. They both learn things about their parents going through, like, some older stuff. But, like, he told her to stay here because your father, like, wanted you and your sister have nothing to do with me. I'll go find Hope Michelson, I'll put her down and try and save your sister. But by the time Lizzie caught up with him, Josie had already become a vampire, and she almost killed Rick. Well, she does, but he's still hanging on. And so Lizzie ends up killing her sister because, like, you are already gone. This is my way of basically saving you, And Rick ends up giving her 2 guns. It's like, yeah, like, she might be a stronger vampire, but nature always creates a loophole, which we already know. She doesn't know it at the time, but that's going to be complicated because Cleo's still hiding the loophole because she's trying to determine whether or not she should tell anybody. She talks to, like, a version of Caleb, which I think there's a neat parallel there, considering, like, Hope used that more than anybody. Like whenever she needed Landon's advice, which I guess it's just your subconscious, just manifesting in the form of someone you want it to be. So, because the advice is a lot easier to come from someone else when you feel like you're talking to someone else rather than yourself. Because sometimes you won't follow your own advice, but if you hear it from someone else, you're more likely to take it, especially if it's from someone you care about their opinion. So Caleb was saying, like, don't tell anyone about it, but at the end of the day, it's got to be but she doesn't want to lie to her friends. But when it was all said and done, for Cleo, it's like, nah, I was right not. It's like, Caleb's like, see, you were right not to tell your friends because, it's like Ethan and Finch were going to attack Hope today. And like, if they had the weapon, that would have gone down a lot worse. One, Hope might be dead, but also Hope would have definitely killed them because she would have seen them as an actual threat. So she would have put them down. So now Cleo's just got to find a way forward because, because that's also the thing, too, like, Hope is saying, like, because Hope did kind of bring up the fact this is technically your fault. Once again, that does get stung up, because it's like, oh, when Cleo tried to kill, like, the weapons and stuff like that. Yeah, when Cleo tried to kill Hope, she kind of looked down afterwards, because you're like, yeah, that's still always going to be the thing of, like, right, I'm the catalyst for a lot of this, because I tried to kill Hope. Yes, I had my own reasons for it, but it still wasn't right that I did that. I had no right to try and do that. So I think that's why, to make up for that, she's going above and beyond trying to save Hope herself, because it's like, it's my only way to make up for what, and the irony is, in her attempts to try and kill Hope, she now actually has the means to literally kill Hope, but she doesn't want to use it. So I think it's just beautiful, the tragic irony behind everything. But, Rick ended up talking about, like, your dad wanted you to have some place away from the violence, which is, like, the title of this episode. So he wanted her raised away from all of this. But even Alarica's like, yeah, you might be a lot more like me than I give you credit for. He's like, maybe your dad bringing you out here was the right thing, but at the end she kind of goes, no, it wasn't. I did like that. He was like, okay, so here's my guns. And she's like, who's Stefan and Damon? And it's like, that's a long story. I'm like, oh. Like, Damon, it makes sense, because Damon was your buddy. I mean, that's what, like, to an extent, like, Caleb kind of fills that role to an extent. But that's also, like, reflective of, like, also Damon and Caroline's mom's relationship. Like, they were, like, besties, too, so, but it's like, it is interesting to think about. The fact is that you are carrying around a gun after Stefan, named after Stefan, too. That's kind of interesting. Well, especially because of the complicated history, because of the whole Caroline thing. It's like, you were in love with her, but she was in love with Stefan. Like, that complicated things for a bit, But I think despite everything, it's like, the good nature, like, despite his bad tendencies, like, the good person that Damon could be, but always knowing, like, Stefan was a good guy. So I think that was kind of important. But it's also interesting. It's almost poetic for Lizzie to be wielding both of those guns, especially like the Stefan situation. But regardless, Hope was giving her a chance, because it's like, oh, there's a darkness in you like it's in your sister, so I want you to join me or die. And she's like, I choose death. And she ends up killing Hope. And you're like, oh boy, indicative of, you were thinking like, oh, maybe this will come out some other, like, maybe this play out some other way. It's like, no. Interestingly enough, MG's the sheriff, which the parallels of, like, yeah, like, he's stepping into the role of the leader to fill that void now that Hope's gone. Which even Ethan's like, oh, I'm being sidelined, but, MG's like, right. The leader's got to make the tough choices for when the big game comes, so he's going to be training up Ethan with his powers and stuff. Because it's like, yeah, you could have died today. He's like, when I was human, that was one thing, but now I'm like, got powers. They're like, you're still sidelining me. I came to this school to be a part of the team. Once again, football metaphors. I mean, it's indicative of this situation, but still, he still does make his football metaphors, being a part of the team and everything. But, because if anyone was going to be the sheriff, when Caleb first showed up, I thought he was going to be the sheriff. So it being MG is very, once again, indicative as well. But when the time came, her father, Lizzie's dad, hears about what she did, and then Lizzie's like, it kind of pieces it together of like that him doing what he did wasn't the right thing to do. But then she reads the words on the wall, because she realized, like, right, she's not ready. She's done forgiving Hope. It's like, she got what she needed out of this. Like, I guess it was more so like she found her way forward. Now, is it the right thing, right for her? Maybe, I don't know, because I don't know. Because the therapy box helps you figure stuff out for yourself. Now, was this the right move to make? I don't know. But for her, it's like, right, my dad wouldn't be who he is in his position right now if he hadn't given up on, like, you know, he became a teacher, and that's what led to him being in his coma right now, because he wasn't the vampire hunter he used to be, and now she's stepping into that role. Because it's like, I'm not forgiving Hope Michelson like everyone else is. They're bending over backwards to save her. It's like, no, I'm not doing that. And even her word to escape, Vindictia, which I'm like, I'm going to assume that's, like, Latin for, like, I would go with, like, Vindicta, but I guess, like, more like Vendetta, I guess would be more about it. So, as she was leaving, Joe was walking by being like, yeah, but, like, the fact is that Hope did this to me means that she could still be, oh, don't worry, Joe. I know a way to fix Hope. And Joe's almost like, wait, what? It's like, no, you enjoy your therapy, your time in the box, and I'll go do what I'm going to do. So the thing is, she's definitely going to be alone in this, because not everyone else is going to have that perspective of like, oh, let's go. Maybe Fitch would probably go along with this just because of Josie's current circumstances, maybe. But she already kind of went against Joe's wishes. She's like, oh, that's why she attacked Hope. She's like, I'm doing something Joe wouldn't. So we'll see. But also Cleo knows, like, she can't trust anyone. She definitely can't tell Lizzie about this, but Lizzie probably will find out, because she knows now, like, oh, there's got to be a loophole, and she's probably going to bring that up to the others, and Cleo's going to have to, like, keep that secret buried super deep, you know? But it's also going to become an issue when it comes out, like, wait, you didn't tell us? It's like, yeah, because I didn't think I could trust you guys. Like, oh, the whole team is supposed to be about trust, but then Lizzie's going to be doing her own, you know? So it's like, if you told us about it, we could have been prepared in case Lizzie ever found out about, like, the means to kill Hope, which she's calling up whoever it is she's talking to from Triad. And it's like, oh, you're a vampire, werewolf, witch? She's like, oh, why ruin the surprise, you know? It's like, oh, I'm coming to find you. Oh, promises, promises, promises. I can't wait to see you. And I love Hope being like, oh, promises, promises, promises. I was almost thinking, like, Lizzie was going to be there to attack her before she, like, had knocked her out or something. But it's like, nope. Like, Hope's on her way, so we'll see how this all plays out going forward into the next episode. It's definitely going to be really interesting, especially with all the stuff that's going on in the afterlife right now. So we still haven't circled back to that yet, so that's interesting. But really, well, before I even end this, because the thing is, if Lizzie does this, even if she does what she believes to be the right thing, putting Hope down, if she does it, she will never forgive herself. That's the thing, too. I think that's also the problem. I mean, you know, that's the whole thing about, like, getting revenge. Like, you need to dig a grave for the person you're going after, but also yourself, because revenge won't, like, bring you to satisfaction. You know, it's like, oh, it won't bring your sister back. She's like, no, but I'll get justice for her. In this particular case, it's like, I'm going to get justice for my dad and anyone that Hope hurts. But that's also the problem, like, regardless of how you're feeling, you're angry right now, but eventually it will hit you sideways, because Hope is like a sister to you. She is your friend. Like, you have this special, like, you always had your contentious relationship. Like I said, it's sad that things have kind of circled back to that under different circumstances, but still related to your dad nevertheless, you know? But it's going to be the thing of, if she does this, she won't forgive herself, you know? I think that's going to be the biggest thing, but we'll definitely, like I said, have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.